Last summer, we took the kids to Legoland, and it was so much fun, but towards the end of the day, you know, like Florida gets hot. So you're just looking for an escape to try to find some AC somewhere. You're like, even if we sit at a restaurant, like we need to get inside because the kids were getting cranky. It was just so hot. So we found in the back part of the park, there's this random building that had a ton of Legos everywhere, and kids could just build. Well, that's like Jace's love language. He loves building. He'll play with the magnet tiles. He'll play with anything he can. Like, you give him 2 toys and he'll start playing. So, of course, this was his heaven. Like, he went straight to it. He started building things. And they had this really cool mechanism thing where if you build something, you push a button and it starts shaking it. So what it does is it shakes it, and you either see, well, did I do a good job building it? Or did I not do a good job building it? And it exposes everything really quickly what happened. And so we were teaching him, we've always kind of taught him, because he also gets very frustrated, that you have to build a firm foundation first, and then as you get higher, when things happen in the world and the things shake, your foundation is strong, and you can make bigger, better, higher things. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is our foundation, our firm foundation. And it's funny because you would think that, like, Danny and I worked together, even though we didn't. And so all the stuff that she was speaking about and proclaiming and ministering during worship is pretty much everything that we're going to be talking about today. And then I promise we did not text this week. We have no idea, but we're just linked. We got it. But I think that's just what God is doing. He's building it up, and even from what Pastor Jake was talking about knowing God's character. When you know his character, you're able to trust the Father. And so as we go in, we're going to start in Matthew 7, verse 24 through 27. And it says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follow it is wise. It's like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the flood waters rise and the winds beat against the house, it will not collapse, because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and does not obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When it rains and floods come, the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. In this passage, you'll find at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. So through the whole Sermon on the Mount, you see Jesus basically teaching and instructing on ways of life. Like, don't judge, don't love your neighbor. Like, you see all these teachings on building your life on that. And then this is how he ends it, because this is what's important. Because if you hear it and you allow it to transform your life, that's when your foundation gets strong. This needed to be the foundation, so then all the other teachings make sense. Does it make good? Okay. So we go to the first outline, the first thing in your outline. It says, the 2 houses look the same from the outside. The 2 houses look the same from the outside. So if you looked at it, you wouldn't be able to tell which one. Obviously, if you looked at the foundation, you could tell. But the point is the look of them look the same. In the next line, it says, a firm foundation takes time. It takes time. When you build your life upon God and when you trust in him, you build that and you go up and you go up. But it takes a vulnerability, and it takes a surrender to that. When you look at a builder, when the foundation is laid, they have to make sure the proper things are in place. Like, they can't lay the concrete and then start building up. They have to let it set, they have to let it settle, and they have to make sure if there's any issues that are going on with it. But on sand, the next outline point is, building our life on sand is easier and faster, but it lacks stability. So we can maybe do all the proper things, right? It's faster to build on sand. You just start building. There's no setting it. There's no checking to see if there's cracks. You just start and you just go. And I feel like sometimes we can maybe start doing all the proper things, like, oh, but I did this. I took time and I made sure the windows fit right when I built my house. I made sure the roof was like attached properly. I made sure I paid top notch for all these things. Or you can say you did all the proper things, but again, if it comes down to the foundation not being strong, it doesn't matter. Winds can come, wind blows, and you know that thing is gone. It's like if you think about even like a hurricane, you can tell the houses that were built fast, right? In Florida, like those cookie cutter subdivisions, you can tell the ones that, yeah, you bought a new house, but it only took like 6 months to build. We'll see when it comes hurricane season. But then you can see the ones that are built upon rock. You can see even the difference between block and wood. If you look at even like Europe, look at how sometimes long these buildings are. Like I know one time we went and visited, when we were in Poland, we visited someone's house, and it looked to the eye like it looked like just a simple barn house. But that house was older than the United States. But it was built right. So you see it being able to withstand all the climates of Poland and being able to withstand everything that it overcame because it had a strong foundation and it was built properly. So as I was thinking about building our life on a firm foundation, and when I was pondering that parable, I immediately thought of Daniel from the Bible. Because Daniel's life, if you look at it, was built on a strong foundation. Because Daniel feared the Lord. When life pressed in and storms came, Daniel trusted God. And you see that through the whole book of Daniel. So I'm going to kind of give you a summary just to see some of the things that Daniel overcame in his life. So Daniel was a captive from Judah, and he was stuck in Babylonian. He gets recruited to serve in the palace because he looked good, he was smart, he came from a good bloodline. So he got recruited to come into the palace, and then he was tested. And so for him and 3 friends, which you find out later is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which actually I found out when I was studying it, that wasn't their real names, that was their changed names. It's cool when you see stories take place and you read it from start to finish, but so they got recruited. So Daniel was friends with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and if you've heard the story of the furnace, they were all together in that in the kingdom. So the king gets a dream. King Nebuchadnezzar gets a dream, and he gets a wild dream. And the kings back then were surrounded by people who had wisdom. Right? Astrologers, people, fortune tellers. So he surrounded himself with people that could maybe give insight of what's taking place. And also I noticed they tap into different streams too. So they have Daniel and them that fear God, but then they also have, there's these astrologers here. They just kind of, if we maybe get everyone here, at least maybe one person would be able to tell us what's going on. So King Nebuchadnezzar gets this dream, and he approaches someone and was like, you tell me the dream, and you also interpret it for me. And the guy is like, what? Because King Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to be fooled. He didn't want to be told and manipulated. He wanted to be told the dream and told what the meaning was. That's not usually how it went. So the guy's like, you're crazy. You're never going to be found. Find someone that can do that. So it gets back to Daniel that's what he's doing. And so Daniel approaches the king and says, give me some time. Give me some time and let me see if I can do it, but I just need some time. So he goes to his friends and they pray. And he's asking God and seeking God to tell him what the dream was, and then also the interpretation of the dream and the vision. And he's able to come to King Nebuchadnezzar. He shows up, with boldness and lays it all out and says, you saw this, this, and this is what God is saying, this is what it means, all of these things. And it's a crazy dream. I'm not going to go over it, but it's a crazy dream and vision of basically the rise of King Nebuchadnezzar, but also the fall. So Daniel spoke with boldness when he needed to declare what the dream was. He basically said, yeah, you're going to be great, but you're also going to fall, and so is your generation. So that took like a boldness within him to do that. The next king comes. So basically, King Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy and he gets kicked out, and that's what the dream was showed. But Daniel, when he got promoted. Daniel got a promotion. And he had more authority in there. So long story short, there's a couple chapters. But then the next king comes in, and they're having this big party. And he remembers, hey, I remember King Nebuchadnezzar took some things from the temple. Go grab those silver gauntlets. Let's have a party with them. So then they go grab the silver, not gauntlets, goblet, whatever. And they start drinking wine out of them, and they're starting to have this huge big party. Well, as they're partying and as they're celebrating, some writing shows up on the wall. And then they start freaking out like, oh my gosh, what is this? What does that even mean? They have no idea what it's even saying because it's in a different language. So can you imagine that? Like, you're just having a good time, and all of a sudden, like, how creepy. Like, I know, like, that's stuff you see in, like, movies. I know I would be creeped out. So then they're trying to figure out, like, okay, what is it saying? What's going on? And so the king at the time calls in anyone that he can. Like, figure this out. What's going on? What is it saying? And no one can do it. Someone in the room, I believe it was the former queen or something, I can't remember, but was like, hey, Nebuchadnezzar had someone on his council that was really good and remembered and told the story about how Daniel got the vision and showed the interpretation. So she was like, go get Daniel, go find Daniel. So they run back, they get Daniel, Daniel prays, and Daniel shows up, and he's able to say what it means. And it was not good. It was basically God was angry. You used something that was in a temple that was blasphemy. And so that king got removed. And then the new king, Darius, showed up and promoted Daniel, admired Daniel, gave him a high seat in his council. And people didn't like that. People that were surrounded by Darius did not like that. Administrators and high officers did not like Daniel. They did not like the position he had. They didn't like that he was fruitful. They just did not like him. So they're like, okay, we're going to get you, Daniel. So then they followed him and they tracked him. And you know what? Daniel was he lived his life with integrity. So they could not find any fault in him. So what they figured is, we're going to find faults in what he believes. And we noticed, because we're tracking him, we noticed that he prays. He has time that he prays. So they went to King Darius and then they manipulated him, and they were like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if for 30 days no one could pray to anyone but you? He's like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I like that. People worship me. That's cool. So for 30 days, he made a law that no one could pray to anyone else but him. And they're like, let's test Daniel. Let's see what he's going to do. And so they watched him, waiting to see whether this is how he was going to respond. And Daniel went home, and Daniel prayed, because that's what he always did. And he didn't care. He didn't waver despite what the law was going to say. And the punishment for that was to be thrown into the lion's den. because that's also what the law said. So they knew they wanted to catch him and they wanted him gone. They wanted to eliminate him. And there was, at the time, there was no like veto, like the king can be like, oh, I'm just going to veto that. It was a decree, like he was nothing he can do. So King Darius was very distraught. Like, oh man, like now one of my my highest members in my council is now having to be sentenced to death because of something that I did, and I don't want to lose him because he's wise. I respect him. He's very fruitful. And so you see in a glimpse form, Darius being distraught about it. So Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den. They had to roll the stone, stamp it, seal it. They can't. They have to just wait until the next day. Well, when they come back the next day, Darius rolls away the stone and calls out, and Daniel goes, hello, what's up? I'm here, I'm still alive, because God shut the mouths of the lions. So Daniel was spared in the lion's den. And he was completely untouched. Completely untouched. And then Darius was like, oh my gosh, he was so thankful he was so happy. But then he was so angry that he grabbed all the officials and all the administrators that got Daniel, conspired against him, thrown into them and their families thrown into the lion's den. And they were so hungry that as soon as they could, the lions get them, they were demolished. That's how hungry. They make the lions hungry, so then it was a gruesome death. Which, no thank you. That sounds horrible. That sounds like a nightmare. But you see in Daniel's life that he faced these challenges, right? He was removed from his home, his country. He was put in a tough spot with his work. Like, am I going to stand firm am I going to be bold? Am I going to kind of, do I need to maybe play the field a little bit? Do I need to kind of kiss up to the boss? Or am I going to speak truth? You see Daniel being lied about being betrayed. You see Daniel ordered to death because of who he was and what he believed in. You see all these unfair things happening to Daniel. But if you look at him and you look at his life and how he responded, he had such integrity. He had such integrity. You see throughout his life that he built his life on God. You see him constantly being put in situations where it's like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. I have nothing else to do but trust you, right? You're getting thrown into the lion's den and you're like, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, but I trust you, God. And you see him praying and seeking godly counsel. Like, you see him on his face asking God, like, can you imagine, like, what that looked like on how he prayed in order to get the vision and the interpretation of a dream that he has no idea what it could be about. And then I love that it was added into the book of Daniel about him seeking godly counsel with his friends and having his friends come behind him in a moment that he needed and to be praying for them, to be praying with him, and that he could have that support. But most importantly, I want to focus on the fact that Daniel never wavered. He never wavered. He went to God in prayer to stay grounded. And I believe even the fact that it was talked about that he went to God 3 times, it just spoke volumes of, can you imagine then what he was surrounded by? If Daniel's having to constantly put in his schedule 3 times to pray, I can imagine what he heard and what was the atmosphere and the culture at the time what he was around. Because he knew that I needed 3 times a day with God because I needed to stay completely grounded and not be able to be surrendered to what's around me. Because if you look at Daniel, he is an example that if we fear God and make him our firm foundation, what happens? That we will completely not be shaken. That we will be a people that will not be wavered by our circumstances. Amen. That is good. Thank you, Omari. So sometimes we don't know which foundation we have until a storm comes and can reveal what's inside. So when a storm came to Daniel and kind of shaked him up a little bit, you saw him push in to God. You saw him having to walk out that trust in God. You see him living a life where he had to trust in God. And you look at the challenges and how he overcame things, and it is because he partnered with God. And I love that when you see and you question, or let me see, there can be no wasted time. You can always rebuild, right? There's no, I didn't maybe build my life on a firm foundation, so, oh well, like, it's all good. But there's no shame or guilt in God. He builds you up. He calls you up. So then you start now. You start rebuilding now. You start walking this out now. It's like what we were singing, like, he's not done with you yet. If you're still alive and you're breathing, he has a purpose and a destiny for you. And as I was thinking about people having, like, just building your life on a firm foundation, I started thinking about, okay, what can hinder people from having a firm foundation? What are some of the things that maybe have happened or our experiences that hinder that? And some of it is pain and suffering. And trauma is a big one also. Trauma, especially if it happens at a young age, can make you question a foundation. It can make you question love. It can make you question things that you're told. So it kind of gets in your head about whether it's true or not. Sometimes a desire for control, to be self-sufficient, can hinder your foundation. I got this. I can do it. I'm going to do me, right? I'm a boss. I'll figure it out. I don't need no one. Doubt is a huge one. Past experiences where maybe you felt like, oh, I'm going to step out, and it maybe didn't go the way you thought, can hinder your foundation. And another one is fear, especially fear of man, can hinder your foundation. And as I was looking into these and kind of just praying about it, I saw that there was a root to pretty much everyone that I just said, and that is a mistrust in God. That there's something that maybe has happened that will make you question who he is and who his character is. And when we strengthen our trust in God, it strengthens our foundation. In Proverbs 3:5-6, it says, trust from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do. Everywhere you go, he's the one who will keep you on track. Don't assume that you know it all. He's there for you, and he wants to be there for you and walk out life with you. And you see that he's not asking you to just go do it, figure it out. But you see in this scripture, in this passage, where he's saying, surrender it to me. Seek me, and I will help you. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. And he will keep your path straight. He will keep you on track. Be vulnerable with God. And if you look in Psalms and you see King David and the life that he lived, some of those Psalms are just so beautiful because it comes from a position of surrender to him. God, I know that you are good. I know that you're doing something, but people are trying to kill me right now. They're chasing me, and I'm scared. But at the end of the day, again, I know that you are good, and I know that you're going to come through for me. He built his life on that vulnerability and that trust of God, but it takes a position of surrender. It takes a position of, okay, God, here's my heart. Here's what's going on. I'm going to surrender that. And I don't know how this is going to happen, but I'm going to give it to you like this and just trust that you have my back. But that takes asking ourselves hard questions. It takes us maybe being uncomfortable. It takes truly evaluating what's in the inside. Because again, the houses look the same on the outside, but it's the bottom of our foundation that gets questioned. And sometimes we don't want to look at that. Yeah, but I read the book, I read my scriptures, or I come to church, I do this. But at the end of the day, is your life, is your heart being transformed? Is there fruit in your life? Are you walking your life daily with God? Or are you just maybe and being like, oh, I'm good, I'm strong, I'm good, I'm Christian. God's got my back, and you can quote all these things, but if it's not coming from the inside of your heart, and you're not allowing him complete transformation, and you're not allowing him completely in your heart and your surrender and your trust, then you're just kind of going through the motions. And yeah, there's a time and place where that is good, but at the same time, are you truly building your life and continually building that foundation? Because it's so, so vital. We can pretend that we have everything together, but you have to ask yourself, when life gets hard or winds blow, how do you respond? What's your reaction? When you get a bad diagnosis, how do you respond? Right? When you get bad news, how do you respond? When you get maybe overlooked for a position at work, how do you respond? Because we all have our triggers, and we all have our and our things that can maybe test us. But I think if we really look into and surrender to God, he will use those moments to expose the cracks in our foundation, so then we can heal and move forward and make us stronger. But sometimes we can kind of oh, this is getting uncomfortable. I'm just gonna kind of push through, or kind of numb the pain. I'm gonna kind of push through and not deal with it. But what God, I feel like sometimes in just his goodness and his graciousness, is exposing that, so then we can be like, I'm obviously having a hard time trusting you in this area. I'm going to have to lay this down. I'm going to have to surrender. This is going to have to be something that I walk through, and I go to him and see and change, and allow him to completely maybe heal, or maybe strengthen, or maybe get me to talk about it with someone. This past year, I remember one time Pastor James and I opened our bill, like a mortgage bill, and it was how lovely it is to live in Florida when all the insurances go up every year and our mortgage changes, right? And I remember when we looked at it, we were like, oh my God. Oh my gosh, what in the world? And I remember looking at it, and my first initial response is, okay, how are we going to figure this out? Because it was very overwhelming. And so I remember okay, we're going to put the kids to bed, and I just want to sit down. I was told Pastor James, we're going to sit down and we're going to figure this out. I want to talk how to figure this out. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, Emily, there's nothing to figure out. There's nothing to figure out. This has to be God. And I remember that moment, it's like, man, It hurts and it's hard to hear a crack in our foundation. Because what I realized was I was trying to be self-sufficient. And there are times and there is moments where there are problems in your life and you do have to figure them out. But there's also times when it's completely out of your control. You have to give it to God and say, here it is. Here I'm realizing this is my issue. I'm realizing that I allowed my lack of trust in you, God, to push me farther away. And I'm realizing now that I have to now do something about it. And you have to walk that out. In Psalms 112, verse 7, it says, they do not fear bad news. They can confidently trust the Lord to take care for them. So again, when wind comes and life gets hard and kind of things squeeze and push you, how are you going to respond? Are you going to respond like Daniel? Is your life going to be a life of integrity and look like Daniel? Or are you going to be lukewarm, where 1 minute you're good and you can trust God in all these areas, but just don't let this happen to me? Right? Maybe finances isn't an issue with you, but then, but maybe finances isn't an issue with you. But as soon as maybe you find out someone's sick, all of a sudden stuff gets shaken and you start crumbling down. Everyone has their cracks in their foundation, or everyone has their stuff. But it's how we respond and how we surrender it to God. How we walk that out is what builds our foundation and what questions our foundation. And then but it takes a laying down and a surrender. And not just I'm going to do all these things and just be a good Christian and I'm just going to live my life this way. But again, it takes a vulnerability in a position of, you know what, God? This stinks. This is hard. But I'm going to trust in you. This isn't how I saw my life going, but I'm going to trust you that you're going to turn this thing around for me. That you are here for me. And that alone will show you if you have a firm foundation or not. And it's so cool because Daniel lived in a covenant where he had a part to play into the covenant. He had the law. He had certain things. God had his things, Daniel had his things, and then they had a covenant. But we live on the other side of the cross where Jesus came in and took our place and took that side of the covenant from us. So now we can live with an authority. We can live within a boldness and know that Jesus' love is our foundation. There's no question about it anymore. Not that Daniel had a question, but there is a great exchange, his life for ours. So if Jesus is willing to die on the cross for us and take our place, it should be an easy response. It should be an easy surrender. Here I am, God. Here I am. What do you want? But again, if we can't even trust God, if we can't even live our lives with a trusting of who he is, you're going to always question things. If you don't have a trust in God and his character, you will never be able to build your life on a firm foundation, because everything you're not going to be able to trust it. One time we took the kids to the aquarium, and it was so funny because Jace didn't trust the glass that the fish were behind. So I remember Danny and we took the kids, and he was little at the time, and he did not want to get down because not even close to the fish, because he was like, wait, they're right there. And there was no conception of the glass that was in front of him. It felt like this huge, great divide. No, it didn't feel like a great divide for him. And I feel like sometimes, even in our lives here, we have our walk with God and we put a glass wall in front of him because it's like, oh God, I see you do all these things, and I understand that. But I'm scared to even approach you because I don't trust you. And as I was preparing and as I was looking at the message, I really believe that today is a turning point for so many of you here with your foundations in Christ. Because I believe that Encounter Church will be known and will be different because of you guys that live in here. That you guys that are attending, because of the way you live your lives. That we will be known as people that will not be shaken. That as you go into your offices and as you go into your families, we will be known for our foundation. We are not going to be just just an average church that whatever, but we will know and we believe. I know, like Pastor James has talked about this, that we are going to be a house of miracles. But we have to trust God and know that He is the one that does miracles. Right? If we're going to be the most generous church in Tampa Bay, it starts with us trusting God with our money. It starts with us trusting God and building that foundation in Him. And it allows us to be the difference that we need to see in Tampa Bay and in the world. We will be known for our foundation in every single one of our lives. Be like, man, when I call Pat, there's something about her and the way she speaks and the way she prays for me. And then Pat can be a testimony to her about the foundation and where she saw God show up. So ask yourself, and I know it's hard, and I have some lines on there. Where's your foundation with God looking like right now? Is it just, were you able to just build it quickly and you don't have, but when wind comes you kind of feel it? Start today. There's no absence of time with Him. You start now. Don't allow guilt and shame to be like, well, I should have been doing this. I've been coming to church for all these years. No, start now. Start today. Ask yourself, what is hindering you from building your firm foundation in Christ? And allow God in that vulnerability to change and transform your heart. Don't allow truth just to be known, but allow it to transform you today. So we're going to have the prayer team. If you guys can go ahead and come up. We're going to close the service and we're going to have the prayer team come up here. And I want, if this is something that is something is speaking to you and you're wanting people to come into agreement with you and be praying for you and helping you walk this through, we're going to have prayer up here for you. We want to surround you, and these are people that have firm foundations that can speak truth. But in a vulnerable way, ask yourself, am I struggling with mistrust in God? And lay that down. All it takes is, it doesn't have to be this huge formula, but it just takes a surrender. It just takes a laying down of your life and and even the thoughts. God, I lay this down and I'm going to trust that you're going to help me walk this through. That when winds come and my world shakes, that I'm going to be bold and I'm going to be strong and not allow myself to fear the unknown. So we're going to do a worship song. Take time and really meditate on that.